Human favor is never small. Entire civilizations owe their lives. Captain Ava Grace had been running independent freight operations for 12 years, and in all that time, she had never turned down a paying job, no matter how dangerous or remote the destination might be. But as she stood on the observation deck of her ship, the stellar wanderer watching the binary sunset paint the sky in shades of copper and gold over the mining station at Proxima Centauri b, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. The Stellar Wanderer was a modified Hercules-class heavy freighter built for long-haul operations in the outer systems. She was 127 meters long with reinforced hull plating and enough cargo space to haul equipment for an entire colony. The ship was 38 years old, but Ava and her crew had kept her in perfect condition, every system tuned. Every bolt tightened, every safety protocol followed to the letter. Ava was 34 years old with auburn hair that she kept in a practical ponytail and green eyes that missed nothing. She had grown up on Europa, working the ice mines before saving enough to buy her first ship, a tiny cargo runner that she had traded up over the years until she could afford the Wanderer. Her crew was small but absolutely reliable, and she trusted each of them with her life. Natsuki Ishida handled navigation and sensor operations. He was 29 years old, with quick reflexes and an intuitive understanding of hyperspace dynamics that had gotten them out of more than one dangerous situation. He wore his black hair short and had a habit of drumming his fingers on his console when he was concentrating. Natsuki had joined Ava's crew 5 years ago after his previous captain had been killed in a pirate attack, and he had never once let her down. Dmitry Volkov ran the engineering section and knew every system on the ship like they were extensions of his own body. He was 42 years old with graying hair and hands that were permanently stained with hydraulic fluid and lubricants. He had served in the Colonial Defense Force for 15 years before retiring to the Merchant Marine, and he could make their aging ship perform miracles when the situation demanded it. Dr. Amara Okafor served as their medic and communications specialist. She was 31 years old with dark skin and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to see through any lie or deception. She had trained as a xenobiologist before joining the crew, and her knowledge of alien physiology had saved lives more than once when they encountered non-human clients. She spoke 7 languages fluently and could manage basic conversations in 12 more. The crew was sitting in the common area sharing dinner when their communication array started picking up something unusual. Natsuki looked up from his meal with a puzzled expression. "Captain, we're getting a transmission on the emergency frequencies, but it's not coming from any human colony or ship that I recognize." Ava set down her fork and walked over to the communication station. The display showed wave patterns that didn't match anything in their database. The computer was working to analyze the signal, but the translation protocols were struggling with the alien syntax. "Dr. Okafor, can you take a look at this?" Ava called. Amara joined them at the console and studied the readouts, her expression growing more serious as she examined the data. "This is definitely non-human origin. The linguistic patterns suggest a species we haven't encountered before, but the emotional resonance is unmistakable. This is a distress call." "Dmitry, Natsuki, get over here. We need to figure out what we're dealing with," Ava ordered. The entire crew gathered around the communication station as the computer continued working to decode the alien transmission. Finally, after several minutes of processing, a voice came through the speakers. It was clearly alien, but the computer had managed to translate the words into standard English. "This is First Scholar Thek Varan of the Luminous Collective, broadcasting from the world we call Radiance. Our system has been invaded by the Devourers. They came without warning from the void between stars. Their ships are like living nightmares that consume everything in their path. They do not seek conquest or resources. They simply consume and destroy everything they touch." The voice paused, and when it continued, it was filled with desperation. "We are a peaceful people. We study the stars and create art and music. We have no weapons that can stand against them. Our orbital stations are being dissolved. Our cities are being consumed. The Devourers turn our own matter against us, creating more of themselves from our bodies and our buildings." Another pause filled with static and background noise that sounded like screaming. "If anyone receives this transmission, please know that we try to preserve our knowledge. We try to save our children. But the Devourers are too strong. They do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They simply consume. Please remember that the Luminous Collective existed. Please remember that we contributed beauty to the universe." The transmission ended and the bridge fell into stunned silence. Ava felt her stomach twist with horror at what they had just heard. Somewhere out there, an entire civilization was being devoured alive by monsters that consumed matter itself. Computer analyzed the signal source. How far away is this transmission coming from? Ava asked. Signal originated from a star system approximately 7 days travel at maximum hyperspace velocity. The artificial intelligence responded in its calm, synthesized voice. Natsuki was already pulling up star charts on his navigation console. Captain, that's the Kepler 442 system. It's supposed to be uninhabited according to all our records. Well, apparently it's not uninhabited, Dmitri said grimly, and whatever's happening there sounds like it's getting worse by the minute. Dr. Okafor was studying the translation algorithms, trying to extract more information from the alien message. The linguistic pattern suggests this species has a highly developed culture. They use complex grammatical structures that indicate sophisticated, abstract thinking. These are not primitive beings. Captain, Ava walked to the main viewport and stared out at the stars streaming past in hyperspace. She thought about the voice they had heard. Tech Varun had sounded so intelligent, so civilized, and so absolutely terrified. The idea of an entire species being consumed alive made her feel sick. What are we gonna do, Captain? Natsuki asked quietly. Ava knew what the regulations said. Any contact with unknown alien species had to be reported to Colonial Command immediately. They would file the proper reports, send the information up through the bureaucratic chain. Committees would analyze the data, administrators would debate jurisdiction, and by the time anyone made a decision to act, it would be far too late. But she also knew that every hour they delayed meant more innocent beings were dying horrible deaths. Dmitri, how are our engines running? Could we change course if we needed to? Running at peak efficiency, Captain, we could alter our route, but it would mean abandoning our current cargo contract, and we'd be looking at serious penalties from the shipping guild. Dr. Okafor, do we have enough medical supplies and equipment if we encounter survivors? Our medical bay is fully stocked, and I have portable emergency kits that could treat a variety of alien physiologies. Natsuki, can you plot a course to the Kepler 442 system? Natsuki's fingers moved quickly over his navigation controls. Course plotted and ready, Captain. But sir, we have no idea what we're flying into. These devourers could destroy our ship before we even get close enough to help anyone. Ava looked at each member of her crew. These were good people who had signed up to haul cargo between the colonies, not to get involved in alien wars. She had no right to put their lives at risk for strangers they had never met. I know this isn't what any of us signed up for, she said carefully. If we change course, we'll lose our shipping contract. We could face legal action from the guild. We might even be violating colonial regulations about unauthorized contact with alien species. She met each of their eyes in turn. But right now, somewhere out there, intelligent beings are dying and they asked for help. I can't ignore that, and I won't abandon them to face extinction alone. Ava took a deep breath. But this decision affects all of us, so we're going to vote everyone who supports changing course to help these people. Raise your hand. Ava raised her hand immediately. Dr. Okafor's hand went up next, followed quickly by Dimitri's weathered hand. Natsuki hesitated for a moment, clearly thinking about the risks, then his hand rose steadily into the air. It's unanimous then, Ava said. Natsuki changed course for Kepler, 442 maximum speed. Dmitri, give me everything those engines can handle. Dr. Okafor, start preparing for potential alien casualties, and everyone stay alert. We have no idea what we're about to face. The Stellar Wanderer changed direction, leaving behind their safe cargo run for the unknown dangers ahead. None of them realized that their simple decision to help would trigger the largest humanitarian crisis response in human history. 7 days later, the Stellar Wanderer dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and what Ava and her crew saw made their blood freeze. The system contained a beautiful blue-green world surrounded by what had once been an impressive space infrastructure. Orbital stations, shipyards, and defensive platforms were all there, but they were being systematically consumed by something that defied comprehension. The Devourers were not ships in any conventional sense. They were massive organic constructs that looked like a cross between jellyfish and spiders. Each one was kilometers long. With translucent flesh that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, they moved through space like living things, which Ava realized with horror they actually were. Dear God, what are those things? Natsuki whispered as he stared at the main display. The creatures were attached to the orbital installations, feeding on them, literally consuming the metal and converting it into more of their own biological matter. Ava watched in fascination and revulsion as one of the Devourers extended tendrils that seemed to dissolve a space station on contact, turning the solid matter into nutrients that flowed back into the creature's body. They're not just destroying the infrastructure, Dr. Okafor said, her voice shaking. They're eating it. They're converting inorganic matter into biological tissue. Dimitri was working frantically at the sensor station, trying to understand what they were seeing. Captain, these readings don't make sense according to our instruments. Those creatures are violating several laws of physics. They're converting matter and energy in ways that should be impossible. Smaller Devourers were moving between the larger ones and the planet's surface, but they weren't carrying cargo. They were hunting. They would swoop down to the surface and return with what looked like organic matter, presumably the remains of the planet's inhabitants. Can you get us closer without being detected? Ava asked. I can try, Captain. These creatures seem to rely on bioelectric sensors rather than technological detection. If I keep our power output low and use the asteroid field for cover, we might stay hidden. The Stellar Wanderer moved carefully through the outer system, using the gravity well of a gas giant to mask their approach. As they got closer, the scale of the devastation became even more apparent. Entire continents had been stripped of vegetation, and the oceans were turning a sickly green color as the Devourer's biological waste products contaminated the water. Suddenly, their communication system came alive with dozens of weak signals scattered across the planet's surface. The computer was picking up transmissions in the same alien language they had heard in the original distress call. Computer, translate all incoming signals, Ava ordered. The speakers filled with voices speaking in terror and despair. Families were calling out final messages. Teachers were trying to comfort students as their schools were consumed. Scientists were documenting the end of their civilization, even as death approached them. One voice came through clearer than the others. It was the same voice from the original transmission. This is First Scholar Thek Varun. I am broadcasting from the deep archives beneath the capital city of Harmony. Most of my people have been consumed by the Devourers. They have turned our forests into biological sludge and our cities into feeding grounds. I have 47 others with me, including 23 juveniles. We have sealed ourselves in the emergency bunkers, but the walls are beginning to dissolve. We estimate 6 hours before the barriers fail completely. The voice paused, and when it continued, it was filled with a dignity that made Ava's heart ache. If anyone receives this message, please know that the Luminous Collective contributed beauty to the universe for 3,000 years. We created art that celebrated life. We studied the stars to understand our place in creation. We loved, we dreamed. We hope to please do not let our culture be forgotten completely. Ava made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Natsuki, can you trace that signal to its source? Working on it. Captain, the interference from the Devourers is making it difficult, but I think I can isolate the transmission point. Do it take us down carefully and keep us hidden. The Stellar Wanderer entered the planet's atmosphere, which was thick with spores and biological contaminants released by the Devourers. Through the toxic clouds, they could see the devastation below. What had once been a world of crystalline cities and bioluminescent forests was now a wasteland of organic sludge and partially dissolved structures. They found Thek Varun's location in the ruins of what had been a magnificent library complex. The buildings above ground had been partially consumed, but the deep archives were still intact, protected by some kind of energy barrier that was slowly weakening. Ava, Dr. Okafor, and Dimitri put on full environmental suits and left the ship. The surface was toxic and hostile to human life. The air itself seemed to be alive with microscopic devourer organisms that tried to break down their suit materials. They made their way carefully through the ruins, following the signal to a reinforced bunker deep underground. Hello, Ava called out through her suit's communication system. Thek Varun, this is Captain Ava Grace of the human vessel Stellar Wanderer. We received your distress call. We're here to help. A section of the bunker wall shimmered and became transparent, revealing the most alien yet beautiful beings Ava had ever seen. Thek Varun was tall and graceful, with translucent skin that glowed with soft patterns of light. His limbs were elongated and delicate, and his large eyes held an intelligence that was unmistakably sentient. Behind him stood 46 others, including the juveniles who stayed close to the adults. "You came," Thek Varun said in accented but clear English. "You actually answered our call, I had hoped, but I did not dare believe that anyone would risk themselves for strangers." Dr. Okafor immediately began examining the injured aliens while Ava and Dmitri talked with Thek Varun about what had happened to his world. "The Devourers appeared 8 days ago," he explained. "They did not announce themselves or make demands, they simply began consuming our orbital infrastructure. We tried to communicate with them, but they do not respond to any form of contact. They seem to be driven by pure biological imperative to consume and reproduce." "How many worlds have they attacked?" Dmitri asked. Thek Varun's luminous patterns dimmed with sorrow. "We managed to intercept fragments of their biocommunications before our satellites were consumed. They have devoured at least 17 worlds completely, leaving nothing behind but empty space and scattered biological waste." Ava was recording everything on her personal device humanity needed to know about this threat. "What can you tell us about their capabilities? Do they have any weaknesses?" "They are incredibly adaptive and they learn from each encounter they consume not just matter, but information, somehow absorbing the knowledge and technology of their victims. However, they seem to be vulnerable to certain energy frequencies. We discovered this by accident, when one of our research station's quantum resonance generators caused them to retreat temporarily." Before Thek Varun could explain further, alarms started ringing throughout the bunker. The energy barrier that had been protecting them was finally failing. "The Devourers have found us," Thek Varun said with surprising calmness. "Captain, you should leave while you still can. We are grateful that someone answered our call, even if you cannot save us." "We're not leaving anyone behind," Ava said firmly. "How many people can we fit in our cargo bay?" "All of us if necessary, but Captain, these creatures will pursue us. They can survive in the vacuum of space, and they are faster than most starships." Natsuki's voice crackled through their communicators. "Captain, we have multiple Devourers approaching our position. We need to move immediately." They rushed to evacuate everyone from the bunker. The surviving Luminous Collective members moved with surprising speed despite their exhaustion and terror. As they boarded the Stellar Wanderer, Ava was amazed by their composure. Even facing extinction, they maintained their dignity and concern for each other. The ship lifted off just as the first Devourer tendril broke through the bunker's failing barrier. Natsuki pushed the engines to maximum power, climbing through the toxic atmosphere, while more Devourers converged on their position. "They're following us," Natsuki reported, "and they're gaining fast. These things can move through space like they're swimming through water." "Can we reach hyperspace?" Ava asked. "Not with them this close. They're generating some kind of interference field that's preventing hyperspace entry." Dr. Okafor was working frantically in the cargo bay, treating injured refugees, while Thek Varun provided translation and medical information about his species. "Captain," she called over the intercom, "several of our passengers are severely injured, but they're stable for now." Dmitri was monitoring the pursuing Devourers when he noticed something strange. "Captain, these creatures are sending out some kind of biological signals. It's almost like they're calling for reinforcements." "More of them are coming," Thek Varun confirmed. "They can communicate across vast distances through bioquantum entanglement. Once they detect resistance, they summon the entire swarm." Ava realized they were not just fleeing from the Devourers in the system. They were about to face a much larger threat. "How many are we talking about?" "Unknown, but we detected at least 300 individual Devourers before our long-range sensors were consumed." The Stellar Wanderer finally broke free of the interference field and jumped to hyperspace, but Ava knew they had only bought themselves temporary safety. The refugees were safe for now, but the threat was far from over. Natsuki set course for Earth maximum speed. "What about our cargo contracts?" Dmitri asked. "Forget the contracts," Ava said. "This is bigger than shipping schedules. This is bigger than all of us. Earth needs to know what's coming." As they traveled through hyperspace, Ava composed the most important message of her life. She included all their sensor data recordings of the Devourers and testimony from Thek Varun about the 17 consumed worlds. She ended her message with words that would echo through history. "Humanity is needed here. We cannot let this continue." Admiral Phoenix Cross was reviewing fleet deployment schedules when the priority alert came through. It was midnight at Colonial Defense Headquarters on Luna, and Phoenix had been working late on logistics reports for the Outer Rim Patrol fleets. But when her secure communicator started flashing with the highest priority code, she knew something major was happening. The message was from Captain Ava Grace of the independent freighter Stellar Wanderer. Phoenix had never heard of Grace, but any message with that priority level meant immediate attention. Phoenix opened the file and watched Ava's recording. At first, she thought it might be some kind of elaborate fraud aliens that consumed matter itself, creatures that violated the laws of physics. It sounded like something from a science fiction thriller. But as she watched the footage of the partially consumed world and saw the desperate faces of the alien refugees, Phoenix realized this was terrifyingly real. Phoenix immediately contacted President Isabella Santos. It was well past midnight, but this could not wait. The president answered on the second ring. "This better be critical, Phoenix," she said. "Madam President, I'm sending you a file that you need to see immediately. Watch it now, then call me back." 45 minutes later, President Santos called back. Her voice was completely different now, hard as steel and cold as space. "Get everyone to the Pentagon immediately. I want the Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense, the head of Colonial Fleet Command, and the Director of Xenological Research. I want them there in 2 hours." Phoenix had never heard the president sound so grimly determined. She started making calls, waking up the most important military and scientific leaders in the solar system. Within 3 hours, they were all sitting around the table in the Pentagon's most secure briefing room. General Augustus Reed, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, watched the recording twice before speaking. "How do we verify this is authentic? This seems almost too horrific to be real." Admiral Keiko Tanaka, head of Colonial Fleet Command, slammed her fist on the table. "Look at those creatures, Augustus. Look at what they did to that world. You think someone could fake biological matter conversion on that scale?" Dr. Rajesh Patel, director of Xenological Research, was studying the technical data Dimitri had collected. The energy signatures are consistent with bioquantum manipulation, but scaled up beyond anything we've theorized. If this is real, we're dealing with a life form that can rewrite the fundamental rules of matter and energy. President Santos stood up and walked to the window overlooking the Potomac River somewhere out in space. Ava Grace and her crew were racing toward Earth with alien refugees, while billions of innocent beings faced extinction at the hands of monsters that consumed entire worlds. "How many worlds did they say were destroyed?" she asked quietly. 17 worlds, Madam President," Phoenix replied. 17 entire civilizations consumed completely." The president turned back to face the room. "How many ships can we mobilize for a rescue operation?" General Reed looked uncomfortable. "Madam President, we're talking about deploying against an unknown alien threat that has technology beyond our comprehension. We could be starting a war that ends with Earth being consumed." Admiral Tanaka stood up. "We already know what happens when nobody fights them. They consume worlds anyway. The question is whether we're going to wait until they reach human space." Dr. Patel pulled up star charts on the main screen. "Based on the trajectory data, the Devourer territory appears to be expanding in our direction. If their consumption rate remains constant, they could reach the outer colonies within 18 months. 18 months until they reach human worlds." General Reed shook his head. "And we have no idea how to fight creatures that can convert matter at will." President Santos walked back to the table and sat down. She looked at each person in the room, then spoke in a voice that brooked no argument. "Ladies and gentlemen, let me make something absolutely clear. I did not become president to watch genocide happen while we debate tactical disadvantages." She stood up again and pointed at the screen, which still showed images of the partially consumed world. Imagine if that was Earth being dissolved. Imagine if those were human children being consumed while aliens debated whether it was worth the risk to help them. The room fell silent. Everyone was thinking about their own families and their own worlds, their own species. Every person in this room swore an oath to protect innocent life. The president continued. "Well, innocent life is being consumed right now, and we have the power to help. I don't care if they're human or alien. I don't care if it's dangerous. We're gonna stop these monsters." Admiral Tanaka smiled grimly. "What are your orders, Madam President?" "I want every available warship ready to deploy within 72 hours. Every Marine, every pilot, every scientist who can contribute. We're going to show these devourers what happens when they threaten innocent people within range of Earth." Over the next 18 hours, Earth became a hive of unprecedented activity. Every military base in the solar system received mobilization orders. Ships that had been in maintenance were rushed back into service. Civilian vessels were requisitioned and converted for military use. Weapons factories switched to emergency production. The UCS Defiance, Earth's most advanced battleship, was chosen as the flagship. Captain Victoria Sterling, a veteran of the asteroid wars, was given command of the entire fleet. She had fought pirates and corporate militias, but never anything like this. At military bases across Earth and the colonies, soldiers loaded equipment and said goodbye to their families. Many of them had never fought aliens before, but they were determined to protect beings who needed their help. Dr. Patel worked around the clock with Thekvaran, who had agreed to serve as an advisor to develop tactics that could give humanity an advantage against the Devourers. His knowledge of their bio-quantum manipulation abilities was crucial to understanding how to fight them. The key is disrupting their quantum coherence, Thekvaran explained. They maintain their biological integrity through quantum entanglement at the molecular level. If you can break that entanglement, they lose the ability to manipulate matter. Meanwhile, the Stellar Wanderer was still racing toward Earth. With the refugee survivors, Ava had been sending regular updates on their condition. The Luminous Collective members were amazed by human compassion, especially Dr. Okafor's dedication to treating their injuries despite not being trained in their physiology. "Why are you doing this?" Thekvaran asked Ava as she helped distribute food to the refugees. "You do not know us. We have nothing to offer you in return for this kindness." Ava thought about his question for a long time before answering. "Because it's what decent people do when someone calls for help. You answer because every intelligent life form deserves a chance to exist and create beauty in the universe." By the end of 72 hours, 512 ships had gathered at the staging area near Mars. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Battleships, destroyers, carriers, research vessels, and support ships stretched across space like a constellation of determination. President Santos gave a speech to the nation explaining why Earth was going to war. "My fellow humans," she said, "today we learned that we are not alone in the universe. We also learned that a threat exists among the stars that seeks to consume all life, not for conquest or resources, but for the simple biological imperative to devour and multiply." She paused and looked directly into the camera. "But they made one crucial mistake. They consumed worlds where people called for help, and humans heard those calls. Today, Earth's children go to the stars not as conquerors, but as protectors. We go to show the galaxy that as long as Earth exists, no genocide will go unanswered." The fleet began moving toward devoured territory the next morning. Ava Grace's simple act of compassion had awakened something in humanity that the galaxy had never seen before. The Devourers were about to learn why Earth was home to the most stubborn species in known space. 6 weeks later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of known Devourer territory. Captain Victoria Sterling stood on the bridge of the UCS Defiance, looking at the massive formation of Earthships spread out around her 512 vessels. The largest fleet in human history, all ready to fight for people they had never met. "Communications, open a channel to all ships," Victoria ordered. "Channel open, Admiral. This is Admiral Sterling to all vessels today. We fight not for territory or glory, but for the right of all life to exist in the universe. We fight for those who can no longer fight for themselves. Remember why we're here. Remember Captain Grace and her crew who risked everything to answer a call for help. Let's show these Devourers what humans do when innocent people need protection." Their first target was a system where the Devourers had been detected consuming another world. Intelligence reports indicated this was where they maintained their primary breeding grounds, where they converted consumed matter into new Devourers. Prime Devourer Keth Morax was absorbed in the ecstasy of consumption when its subsidiary organisms reported the approach of unknown vessels. The massive creature's bioluminescent patterns flickered with interest as it analyzed the sensor data. These new arrivals were different from the usual prey species. They moved in coordinated formations, and their technology showed signs of aggressive adaptation rather than purely defensive measures. "How many vessels?" Keth Morax asked through bioquantum communication. "Our sensors indicate over 500 individual craft. They are composed of metallic substances that would provide excellent matter for conversion." The Prime Devourer's pattern shifted to anticipation. "Excellent. We have not encountered a technologically advanced species in several consumption cycles. Their matter will be particularly nutritious, and their technology will enhance our adaptive capabilities." They are broadcasting some form of communication directed at us. Play their message. I am curious to hear what they say before we consume them. The transmission came through translated by the Devourer's biolinguistic processing. Admiral Sterling's voice was clear and determined. To the creatures known as Devourers, you have consumed 17 worlds and countless billions of innocent lives. This ends now. You have exactly 1 hour to cease all hostile activities and withdraw from this system. If you refuse, we will stop you by force. Keth Morax made a sound that might have been laughter, a bioacoustic vibration that caused nearby asteroids to dissolve. They demand that we cease consumption. They threaten us with force. Do they not understand that we are the ultimate expression of biological perfection? What are your orders, Prime Devourer? Prepare all organisms for feeding. We will show these humans the futility of resisting the great consumption. Their matter will make us stronger. 1 hour later, the Devourer swarm moved to attack positions. Keth Morax commanded 87 major organisms, each 1 kilometer in length, and capable of converting entire starships into biological matter. Within minutes, the creatures had never encountered meaningful resistance and expected this to be another routine feeding. All organisms attack formation, it ordered. Consume everything, leave nothing behind. The two forces approached each other across the dark space between worlds. On the UCS Defiance, Victoria Sterling watched the approaching Devourers. Her crew was tense. They had never fought anything like these biological nightmares. "Admiral, they're moving to attack formation," reported her tactical officer. "All ships implement Battle Plan Alpha. Remember, hit them with quantum disruptors. First, disrupt their molecular coherence, then follow up with conventional weapons once they're destabilized." The Devourers struck first, extending massive tendrils that could dissolve matter on contact. But the human ships scattered in all directions, their superior maneuverability and coordination making them difficult targets for creatures accustomed to consuming stationary prey. Then the humans fired back, and Keth Morax experienced something it had never felt before: pain. The quantum disruptor weapons developed from Thek Varen's research caused its bioquantum matrix to destabilize, making it impossible to maintain molecular manipulation abilities. Impossible! Keth Morax pulsed in Bioshock. How are they disrupting our quantum coherence? Its subsidiary organisms were panicking as conventional human weapons tore through their destabilized biological tissue. Prime Devourer. Their weapons are crude, but they are preventing us from converting matter we cannot feed, we cannot adapt. Fall back to the nursery grounds, we will make our stand there. But when the surviving Devourers reached their breeding facility, they found human ships already waiting for them. Dr. Patel had analyzed their bioquantum signatures and predicted exactly where they would retreat. The second phase of the attack came from the human Marine Corps. Thousands of assault pods launched from the fleet, targeting the Devourer's central nervous clusters. Captain Brooks Anderson led the assault on the primary organism where they believed the Devourer leadership was located. The Marines had been equipped with quantum disruption weapons that could destabilize Devourer tissue on contact. They fought their way through the creature's biological corridors like antibodies attacking an infection. Brooks found himself in what appeared to be the Devourer's central consciousness chamber, where Keth Morax's primary neural mass was located. The Prime Devourer was massive and alien, but its bioluminescent pattern showed clear signs of fear. "You cannot stop the great consumption," Keth Morax pulsed. "We are the natural conclusion of biological evolution. All matter must eventually be converted." Brooks raised his quantum disruptor. "Not today, it won't." The battle for the Devourer breeding grounds lasted 8 days. The creatures fought desperately, using every biological adaptation they had developed over millions of years. But they had never faced an enemy that could disrupt their fundamental biology. On the 8th day, the last Prime Devourer was captured trying to escape in a bioship that had been converted from the remains of a consumed starship. It was brought before Admiral Sterling on the bridge of the Defiance. "I do not understand." The creature pulsed through the translation matrix. "We are the perfect life form. We have consumed countless worlds. How did you defeat us so easily?" Victoria looked at the alien horror that had destroyed 17 civilizations. "You made 2 critical mistakes. First, you thought biology was everything, but you never learned to adapt when faced with quantum physics. Second, you thought consumption was survival, but you never understood that cooperation is evolution." She leaned forward. You also made a third mistake. You consumed worlds where people called for help, and that call reached Earth. Humans never ignore people who need us. While the main fleet was fighting the primary devourer force, other human task forces were racing to every system where biological consumption had been detected. The hunt for the remaining creatures had begun. Ava Grace and the Stellar Wanderer joined the rescue efforts. Her ship had become a symbol of hope to the scattered survivors of the consumed worlds. Thek Varun worked with her to coordinate the search for any remaining survivors from the 17 destroyed worlds. "Your species is remarkable," he told Ava as they watched human ships distributing aid to refugee camps. "You could have decided our distress call was not your concern, but you answered anyway." Ava smiled. "That's what humans do. We help people who need help." Dr. Patel was coordinating the biological cleanup of former Devourer territory when she received reports that made her heart race. Other alien species were sending messages to Earth asking for help against different threats. Word was spreading through the galaxy that humans were the species to contact when you needed protection. The war with the Devourers lasted 4 months. By the end, what remained of their forces were scattered across the galaxy. No longer a unified threat of consumption, but isolated organisms being tracked down by human-led task forces and their new alien allies. But the real victory was not the military conquest. It was the moment when survivors looked up at the sky and saw human ships bringing medical aid and supplies. It was the moment when children who had watched their worlds being consumed were given new homes. It was the moment when species that had been marked for extinction realized they would survive and rebuild. The galaxy was learning that when humans heard a call for help, they did not send bureaucrats or committees, they sent protectors and healers. 8 months after the last devourer organism was neutralized, Admiral Phoenix Cross stood in the memorial gardens that had been built on Luna to honor the 17 consumed worlds. Each lost civilization was represented by a living monument from Earth and a crystalline display describing the culture that had existed there. Representatives from every surviving species had come to witness the dedication. Beings with scales, tentacles, crystalline bodies, and energy fields stood together in the gardens, all grateful to be alive and free from the threat of consumption. Phoenix looked out at the diverse crowd and felt proud of what humanity had accomplished. But she also felt the weight of responsibility. This victory belonged to all the species who had suffered under devourer predation, not just to Earth. "Admiral Cross," called a familiar voice. Phoenix turned to see Ava Grace walking up the path with Thek Varun beside her. The merchant captain was wearing a new uniform now. She had been commissioned as a captain in the newly formed Galactic Protection Service. "Ava, Thek Varun, good to see you both," Phoenix said. "How are the reconstruction efforts progressing?" Thek Varun's bioluminescent pattern sparkled with what Phoenix had learned was the equivalent of joyful tears. "Better than we ever dared hope. Your people have helped us establish new colonies on 14 worlds. Already our juveniles are creating art again. Our scholars are preserving the knowledge of all the lost civilizations." "And the research project?" Phoenix asked. "The Galactic Memory Archive will open next year," Ava said with pride. "Thek Varun and his people are working with human scientists to preserve the cultural heritage of all the consumed civilizations. They want to make sure no knowledge is ever truly lost again." Through the crowd, Phoenix spotted other familiar faces. Dr. Patel was consulting with xenobiologists from 12 different species developing new defensive technologies. Captain Anderson was training multinational marine units in anti-biological warfare techniques. Natsuki Ishida was there with a team of navigation specialists from 8 different worlds working to establish a galaxy-wide early warning network that could detect biological consumption events before they spread. Dmitry Volkov had founded an engineering academy where human mechanics learned to maintain alien technology, while alien engineers taught humans about their advanced systems. The exchange of knowledge flowed both ways, creating innovations neither species could have achieved alone. Dr. Amara Okafor now headed the Interspecies Medical Corps, training doctors and medics to treat the diverse physiologies they encountered across the galaxy. Her original xenobiology training had evolved into something far greater. She was helping establish universal standards of care that honored the biological diversity of all sentient life. Phoenix watched the ceremony unfold as President Santos stepped forward to dedicate the memorial. The president had aged in the months since the crisis began, but her voice remained strong and clear. "We gather here not just to remember the lost," Santos said, but to pledge that their sacrifice will never be forgotten. The 17 worlds consumed by the Devourers represented billions of unique individuals. Artists, scientists, parents, children, each one irreplaceable. She gestured toward the living monuments. These gardens will grow and change, just as the survivors of these worlds are growing and changing, building new lives while honoring their heritage. The Luminous Collective's poetry now inspires human artists. The crystalline mathematics of the Helix Confederation helps our engineers build better ships. Every lost civilization continues to contribute beauty and knowledge to our shared future. Thek Varun stepped forward, his bioluminescent patterns shifting to formal ceremonial colors. "There is a concept in our language that has no human equivalent," he said. "It translates roughly as the light that bridges darkness. It means the moment when someone chooses to help despite the cost, despite the risk, despite having no obligation to act." His patterns brightened. Captain Grace and her crew embodied this concept when they answered our distress call. Humanity as a whole embodied it when Earth mobilized to save people they had never met. You have shown the galaxy what it means to be civilized, not advanced technology or complex societies, but the simple willingness to help when help is needed. President Santos smiled. "Captain Grace, would you like to say something?" Ava stepped forward, still somewhat uncomfortable with the attention. She looked out at the diverse crowd, beings from dozens of worlds, many of whom existed only because humanity had answered their calls for help. "My crew and I were just doing what felt right," she said simply. "We heard people asking for help, and we couldn't ignore that. I think that's what makes us human. Not our technology or our military, but the fact that when someone needs help, we show up." She paused, thinking about the journey that had brought them all here. The universe is vast and often dangerous, but it's also full of people worth protecting. Every species here has something beautiful to contribute. Our job isn't to be the galaxy's police force. It's to be the neighbors who come running when someone calls for help. The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence for the lost worlds, followed by the lighting of the Eternal Flame, a bioluminescent organism created jointly by human and luminous collective scientists that would burn with the combined light of all 17 lost civilizations. As the crowd began to disperse, Phoenix noticed small groups forming naturally. Humans talking with crystalline beings, tentacled scholars sharing data with human researchers, children of a dozen species playing together in the memorial gardens. The galaxy was healing, growing stronger through cooperation and mutual aid. Admiral Sterling approached Phoenix as the crowds thinned. "The Council of Worlds has approved our proposal for the Galactic Protection Service," she said. 47 species have volunteered ships and personnel. They want humans to coordinate it, but it will truly be a joint effort. Phoenix nodded, as it should be. No single species should bear the responsibility alone. "And the new communication network?" "Online in 6 systems already, expanding to 23 more next month. Natsuki's early warning system will ensure no distress call goes unheard again." As the memorial ceremony ended and the representatives began returning to their respective worlds, Phoenix felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The galaxy was not the same place it had been 8 months ago. The threat of consumption had been replaced by networks of cooperation and mutual aid. But most importantly, a principle had been established that would echo through the stars for generations to come. When civilized beings called for help, help would come. The darkness between worlds was no longer empty. It was filled with the light of species who had learned to bridge the void between them with compassion and courage. Ava Grace and her crew had started it all with a simple decision to answer a distress call. Their small act of kindness had grown into something magnificent. A galaxy where no one would face extinction alone, where advanced civilizations measured their worth not by their weapons or wealth, but by their willingness to protect those who needed protection. The Devourers had consumed 17 worlds seeking only to feed and multiply. In response, humanity and its allies had built something far more powerful. A community of worlds dedicated to ensuring that beauty, knowledge, and life itself would survive and flourish among the stars. As Phoenix walked through the memorial gardens one last time before returning to Earth, she read the inscription carved in a dozen languages on the central monument. To those who called for help across the darkness, and to those who answered, may the light between worlds never fade. The galaxy had learned that a human favor, no matter how small it seemed at first, could grow to save entire civilizations. And in saving others, humanity had discovered its own true purpose among the stars. Not as conquerors or explorers, but as the species that showed up when the universe needed protectors. The story that began with one cargo freighter changing course to help strangers had become the foundation of a new age of galactic civilization, built on the simple principle that decent people help when others need help, regardless of the cost or risk. And in the growing light of cooperation between worlds, the darkness that had once seemed so vast and threatening began to recede, replaced by something far more powerful: hope.